Hi,
Hi.
welcome back. We all know that gacha games are just casinos in disguise, and every gacha game dev's only goal is to suck as much money out of you as possible and keep you spending money forever. However, some devs can be a whole lot more scummy than others, with gacha rates ranging from pretty acceptable to absolutely horrendous with no lifeline or guarantee at all. I've played a few gachas in my day and heard a lot more about other gachas as well, so today I've compiled a list of the most prominent examples I can think of when talking about the worst and best gacha rates on the market today. If you're playing a gacha, the only guarantee is that you're getting shafted one way or the other, but this list will show which gacha games have the smallest shaft. Before we start though, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Expressway and Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with and for pictures of my cat. Now let's get onto it. So this list is going to go from worst to best, and I'm going to take several factors into account when ranking each game, not just the rates themselves. For example, a game that gives players 90 pulls for every update with 180 pity is going to be a lot better than a game that gives players 45 pulls every update with the same pity, and the same as a game that gives 45 pulls with 90 pity, so it's all going to be pretty relative. I won't take general game states into account though. One game being objectively or subjectively better or worse than another won't be taken into account, but I'll certainly make fun of any games that are objectively bad. Without further ado though, it should come to nobody's surprise that Dragon Ball Legends is the gacha game with the worst rates on this list. Now, pulling up the list of character rates I found on the wiki, while it is incredibly low, especially when compared to other newer mainstream gacha games, it's actually pretty similar to another game on this list that is much further up, with 10% for sparking units and 0.35% for ultra units, both being about the equivalent of 5 stars and 6 stars respectively. To figure out why DBL is so shit, but that other game is so high up, you have to take into account two very important facts. One is that you barely get any resources for summoning at all, meaning you're basically forced to spend to get the characters you want. And two is that even if you do spend, you can end up spending hundreds, sometimes even thousands of dollars without getting the character you want, because on the banners where it truly matters, which are the ultra character banners, there is no pity system, no soft or hard pity. I would comment a lot on this, but the words absolutely absurd would pretty much suffice. There's a lot of power creep too, but the devs apparently did address it and are planning to completely stop it. They also do have buffs for all characters, however, it doesn't change the fact that people can spend an infinite amount of money and, if they're unlucky enough, never even get the character they want at all. If you want my advice, never touch this game with a 20-foot pole, unless you yourself like being touched, or shafted, by that same 20-foot pole. Now, when first creating the script, there was a huge gap between DBL and the game that came after it. I felt that huge difference between number 1 and 2 was too big and that it needed to be closed, so I found this next game right here. When this game first came out, it was supposed to be simply a cash grab from its JP audience to capitalize upon the IP it was created after, but after people realized that the game had potential, eventually they complained enough to the dev team that they fixed nearly every issue the game had on launch, including the absolutely abysmal gacha rates and currency prices. The game I'm talking about is of course Fate Grand Order. Now honestly, the rates didn't really become good either. They're still pretty bad, better than DBL, but way worse than any of the games further down the list. So up until around 2 years ago, Fate Grand Order didn't even have a pity system, just like Dragon Ball Legends. However, they did add one 2 years ago, and while it is still absolutely gross, disgusting, and should be barely considered a pity system, it's still something, I guess, and does fit the gap between DBL and the game next on the list. So, to get an SSR unit, it's a 0.8% chance per roll. It's honestly not the worst I've seen. I mean, it's more than double DBL's ultra rate. For a pity, you're going to have to use a whopping 330 pulls to guarantee the rate up character you want. When looking at the pity system this game has, it got worse and worse and worse the more it went on. Here's a couple snippets of how it works, the worst of which being pity doesn't actually transfer between rate up banners. I mean, even Genshin doesn't do that, man, holy shit. I thought Hoyo would do this before anybody. The next stipulation for this pity system is if a banner has rotating rate up SSRs, or 5-star units for you new age gacha players, the pity does not carry over between two SSRs if you missed the chance to get the SSR unit you wanted. And finally, which might actually be even worse than the first condition, is that this only counts for the first instance you get the character. And while character dupes aren't really important, some people just have favorites they would want to spend money on. I guess they're spending either way, in for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound, and for spending your entire life savings on a fully maxed out saber. I mean, you can do it in HSR now, I guess. Even though the mathematical average for getting an SSR is around 100 pulls, it's still pretty gross to first only have 300 pity and then no pity because nothing is guaranteed. Now, I did say that game states won't be considered for this list, but it would be very disingenuous to not talk about how FGO's game state is very good and very healthy. You do not need a single SSR to beat the whole game and can do it with just 3-star characters. The only reason this system could be considered very predatory is because 99% of gacha players do it to pull for their favorite characters. The rates in pity are absolute garbage, but as long as you don't pay, you will have a great time in FGO, I guess. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to the next game, which is Genshin Impact.
It's the biggest piece of dog shit.
Like I said, there's a huge gap between DBL and Genshin, which is why I added FGO in the middle of these two. In FGO, you are guaranteed a little more than enough pulls for 2 SSR units per year, and it's around 4 or 5 5-star units in Genshin Impact. It's no doubt that Genshin is way more forgiving than DBL2 since they have a goddamn pity system. It's 180 pulls to guarantee a 5-star character in Genshin, and they usually give around 50 to 60 pulls per patch for F2P players, meaning you can guarantee a 5-star around once every 3 patches. However, the thing that really gets everybody going about Genshin's gacha system is their god-awful weapon banner system that had to get 2 different reworks for players to finally accept it. And it's still pretty bad. We all know of a brave, or scratch that I guess, rich and bald warrior with a lot of money to burn that spent more than $2,000 to try an S5 Staff of Homa, which prompted the dev team to introduce the new garbage charge core system that only gave you the weapon you wanted after you lost 2 50-50s. And in the recent anniversary they changed it to only 1 lost 50-50. Now it's basically just the same as the character banner, but with 80 instead of 90 pity. The fact that weapons are always going to be way less worth than characters though, means that it still is a very garbage system. Weapons should always be guaranteed in my opinion. Now the next 2 games, Hankai Stars and Zenless Zone Zero, are of course published by the same company as Genshin Impact, and they do the character banner the exact same, 180 pulls to guarantee a 5-star character. Each game also giving around the same amount of limited pulls every patch, with the average being 100 to 130, meaning it would take you less than 2 patches to guarantee a 5-star unit. Weapon banners are a lot better than Genshin, never requiring any chart core systems, only having 1 weapon on each banner, meaning that it was never a double 50-50, and it's actually not even a 50-50 at all because in both games it's a 75-25 chance of getting the 1 rate-up weapon on the weapon banner. And by the way, weapons, lycones, whatever they're called in ZZZ, I think W engines, they're all the same thing when it comes to the gacha system, regardless of gameplay. Although, despite the 2 games being incredibly similar, I would rate ZZZ's gacha rates much more highly than HSR's gacha rates, because ZZZ doesn't have nearly as much power creep as Star Rail. I mean, honestly, barely any games have as much power creep as Star Rail, man. Meaning you don't at all feel forced to pull for any unit, meaning your pulls and any of the 5-star units you've ever pulled have much higher value, meaning your future pulls also have higher value because the new characters you got won't depreciate in value faster than a total Ferrari like in Star Rail. So while they're exactly the same rates-wise, ZZZ definitely feels better to pull in my opinion, because your pulls have a lot more value. However, the next game on the list does character banners slightly better than every Hoyo game, and does the weapon banner a lot better than any Hoyo game could ever hope. Can you tell that I don't like Hoyoverse, by the way? Up next is Wuthering Waves with around 80 pity and a 50-50, meaning you need 160 pulls to guarantee a 5-star character. You can also guarantee weapons in 80 pulls because there is neither a 50-50 nor a 75-25, and there is only ever 1 rate-up weapon. You can also get between 100 to 130 pulls per patch in Wuthering Waves if you farm all the events and such. Now I do want to mention that you won't necessarily have to use all 180 or 160 pulls or whatever to get your 5-star character. In fact, in Wuthering Waves you only need to use around 83 pulls for the statistics of getting the 5-star unit to be on your side, since it's around a 1.8 chance. But I don't really want to take those into account because it gets a lot more complicated, and it's just a lot easier to go based off of pity and guarantees, and not how lucky you might get. Even in DBL, you could get very lucky and get the unit you want in like 3 pulls. It doesn't matter. It skews the results too much, so let's not take it into account. Now, the next game on the list is one of my favorite gacha games of all time, the Battlecats. I've praised this game before, and I would praise it to the moon and back. It's such a simple concept, but it is executed nearly perfectly. Its gacha system may seem at first very daunting, and its rates may not seem so special, but it won't take much investigating to see how good Battlecats' gacha system is. Uber rare units, which are the equivalent of 5 stars, have a 5% chance to appear every pull, and legendary units, the equivalent of 6 stars, have a 0.3% chance, and while that is incredibly low and even lower than DBL's 0.35% chance for a 6-star unit, and even worse, there is no pity system, let me explain to you why Battlecats' gacha system is one of the best I've seen. There are 3 main reasons as to why it's so good. One is that the amount of cat food, which is the premium currency you get, is insane for how valuable it is. Now, Battlecats doesn't operate in the same patch system as a game like HSR or Wuthering Waves, so you can't really calculate how many pulls you get per patch. Instead, there's a set amount of cat food you collect in the game that does increase every time they introduce new levels and events, and from my experience, there's a lot of it. I've only re-downloaded Battlecats a month ago, and on a fresh new account, I had more than enough cat food and tickets to do around 100 pulls. That itself may not sound like a lot, especially because you can get way more in other gacha games. But for the second reason why Battlecats' system is so good, every single character in Battlecats is incredibly useful. You're going to use every single 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, and 6-star unit you get for nearly your entire playthrough. However, to guarantee that you will get a lot of good characters, you should never pull on normal banners. Instead, there are many special banners such as Uberfest and Epic Fests that increase the chance of Uber Rare units to 10%, and there are other banners that increase the chance for Legend to 0.6%, and finally there are special events that guarantee you can get an Uber Rare every 10 pulls. Finally, aside from those two reasons, let me introduce you to the wonderful world of seed tracking and predetermined gacha. Battlecats uses a seed system for every account and every banner, and players have found that you can track your seed and figure out what units you will or won't get in a certain amount of pulls. For example, during this last banner, which is one of the best banners in the game actually, nearly doubling the rates for Ubers to 9% up from 5%, but also including the probably strongest legend in the game, I was able to track my seed and find out that I got Daybreaker Izanagi, which is that same probably most powerful legend unit in the game, in just 18 pulls, and you can do that too. While the strats may not seem great at first glance, and while the lack of a pity system does also seem very shitty, the fact that we have banners with insanely boosted drop rates, banners with guaranteed Uber units every multi, the fact that every single unit you will ever get is useful, the fact that character dupes don't matter at all, and the fact that you can seed track to find out what unit you will get, all comes together to make Battlecats' gacha experience very good. If you still have doubts about it being so great and being so high up in the list, just go experience it yourself and you will thank me. There are of course a lot more things to talk about when it comes to Battlecats' gacha system, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about it, so let's move on. Now, before we get to the number one spot, and some people may have already guessed what it is, I want to add in Ethereal Restart as an honorable mention. Now, Ethereal Restart's rates are absolutely impeccable. 5 stars in Ethereal Restart have a 1% chance of dropping with 100 heart pity. There's also no 50-50 and no weapon banner, which is incredibly nice. Character dupes are also mostly just small stat upgrades like a 5% skill damage buff or 12% crit damage buff, for example. So chasing dupes isn't really important, meaning you can get like 90% of the value of a character by simply pulling them once, and it will never exceed 100 pulls. Now, if I knew more about the game, I would probably put it in the number one spot. However, we don't really know how many rewards players are gonna get, because the game isn't out yet. The devs did say they wanted every player to access every character though, so let's see what happens. It will be released on June 5th, and if we truly get enough rewards, then I have no doubt Ethereal Restart would be the game with the best, if not at least one of the best gacha rates out there. However, it's really hard to beat the game with the number one spot, so let's just move on to it. The game with the best gacha rates I've ever seen so far, with a dev team that is incredibly generous with premium rewards, free 5 stars, and on top of all of that, that maintains a stable, balanced, and most importantly fun game state that nobody who actually experienced it would talk negatively about. That game is Ark Knights. Now, Ark Knights' gacha system is pretty complicated when you first look at it. The first thing you have to know is that 5-star characters have an 8% chance of dropping and 6 stars have a 2% chance of dropping, which is already more than 3 times Battlecats' drop rate when it's doubled during a special banner. After 50 pulls of somehow not getting a 6-star character, each single pull after 50 increases the chance by another 2%. So at 51 it's a 4% chance, 55 it's a 12% chance, and at 99 pulls it's a 100% chance. And honestly, if you get to 99, something is definitely wrong with your luck. Like, did you install a witch or something, man? Either way, another condition is that the first 10 pulls you make are guaranteed to include at least a 5-star with a chance for a 6-star. You could sometimes luck out and not even have to spend more than 10 pulls. Now, there is a 50-50, which is sometimes actually a 70-30 in favor of some limited units, but come on, after seeing those rates, are you really gonna blame them for it? These gacha rates basically mean that there's a very high chance you'll be able to get every single character, no matter who it is, at least once, which is further emphasized by most characters going to the standard banner anyway after their release, which is again further emphasized by the fact that gacha isn't even the only way you can obtain characters in Ark Knights. There are actually 2 other systems, including one that allows you to straight up buy characters rotating in and out of the shop. Gacha game without the gacha. I could go on to also comment on Ark Knights' great game state. Ark Knights is a good game, go play it. By the way, thank you to Yuki in the Discord server for giving me all this information. Go subscribe to his channel. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this in the future, and join the Expressway and Discord server for a fun and lovely community to hang out with, all about gaming and anime, and for pictures of my cat. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you next time.